Everyone, welcome to Collision Repair and Focus. I'm your host, Greg Horn. First, I want to start off by saying I am again honored and humbled that you've chosen to spend part of your day with me. I think it's going to be a worthwhile time. We've got a packed schedule. Don't forget, at the end of the broadcast, we're going to have space for questions and answers. And just type your questions into the chat, and I'll take them and answer them as best as I can. So as I said, we do have a really packed agenda. We're going to start with the latest update on tariffs. You know, it seems like every week we get a new change in the tariff situation. We're going to look at collision parts inflation by part type and a side cause of inflation in one of the part types. As always, I look at median delivery days because that always plays into repair cycle time, and we're seeing some very good trends. So I'm going to go a little bit into that, and also an explanation of why I use one particular measurement, which is the median plus 2 standard deviations. We're going to look at new sales trends for vehicles because that always plays into the long-term collision repair strategy for a lot of us. I'm going to look a little bit of history. You know that I'm very much of a trivia geek. We're going to look at some automotive failures past and present. And I'm going to ask you a trivia question. And yes, we're going to give away some prizes. We have a great, for the first 3 people that type into the chat the correct answer, we're going to give a charging block, a carabiner, and a beautiful Parts Trader pen. So lastly, we're going to look at, are we truly in an auto financing crisis? And this is a really serious topic because we are seeing some amazing trends that mirror the housing crisis from back in 2008, 2009. So as I said, we're going to start off looking at tariffs. And the first thing I look at when I see the tariffs is I always say WTF, for what tariff fun. I actually was in the Hartford area not long ago and found an actual town called Tariffville, which looks just like Bloomfield, except everything's 20% more expensive. But getting down to the tariff update, on August 29th, a U.S. Federal Court of Appeals found most of the tariffs imposed by the administration were presidential overreach. But it's important to note, one, that they kept those tariffs in place, untouched, because there's an inevitable appeal to the Supreme Court. That's going to happen around October 14th. But it's important to note that the tariffs that most concern us, which will be the steel, aluminum, imported autos, and imported auto parts, all are under a different tariff law. These are all imposed as part of Section 232 of the 1962 International Trade Agreement. That means that even if the Supreme Court upheld the ban on most of the tariffs, most that would affect 53% of goods that are currently tariffed, the ones that apply to us in the automotive world would still stay in place. Another thing of note is that on that same day, the de minimis exemption for goods under $800 being imported into the U.S., they were exempt from tariffs. That exemption has been eliminated by the administration, and now we're going to see individual items, if you're ordering auto parts, for example, off of Amazon, off of eBay or Temu or Alibaba, or if you're ordering direct from an individual seller of an auto part that is overseas, those are all going to be subject to customs and that additional tariff. And that's going to create a problem. In fact, if you look at eBay, as I am constantly buying parts on eBay, now I see a lot of pop-ups as I go to check out that says, this seller no longer ships to the United States. So we're going to have to figure out how to work around that in the coming months. Now, some good news on the tariff front. U.S.-Japanese trade deal was reached that lowered the tariffs from 27.5% to 15%, which is good news. But you got to remember that previously the tariffs were only 2.5%. So the math geek in me says, wow, that's still a 500% increase on the tariff. 15% is pretty sizable. If you remember though, since 1964 and the influx of the first Datsun and Toyota trucks, there was a 25% tariff levied against light trucks. And in 1989, two-door SUVs, which is one of the reasons you don't see them imported anymore to the US, were subject to a 25% tariff as well. So still remains to be seen what the net effect of 15% on passenger cars and the SUV market will be for these Japanese imports. The other thing we've noticed is that since January, the US dollar index, and what this is a measurement of the dollar, the strength of the dollar exchange ratio against key trading currencies. That index has gone down pretty substantially and closed at 98.2 from a high of 113 back in January. What does that mean? Well, you know, that means that stronger foreign currencies are bidding for salvage in the US, and Copart and IAA will tell you that around 35–36% of salvage is sold to overseas buyers. But the second part of that equation is, okay, let's look at the percentage of vehicles where the car remained in the US. It was bid successfully by a US buyer, but he had to outbid a foreign buyer. That's another 36%. So said another way, salvage in the US is influenced by about 72% of the time by a foreign currency. So it is really going to impact recycled parts, and we're starting to see that. This is a file I created for Parts Trader when I joined about 5 years ago to measure a specific market basket of inflation. Very similar to the Consumer Price Index, we take a set basket of major car parts that can be obtained either recycled, aftermarket, or new. So I'm looking at major part types. I'm looking at bumper covers, headlamps, grills, fenders, hoods, as well as alloy wheels. And we track that market basket as an inflation rate over time, and we can see a couple of interesting trends here. Starting off at the top, you can see that the new OEM inflation rate is one of the highest, and it has gone up pretty significantly so far in 2025. Also of note is that we're starting to see an uptick in recycled parts prices, and I believe that that is because of that weaker dollar exchange. We're seeing that cars that stay in the US for salvage harvesting are costing those salvers more, and they're passing it on to the end customer. Also, the only downward trend is for price match parts. And you say, well, how is that when the OE part is going up in price? Really, that is because with a few exceptions like Stellantis, we're seeing lower price matching, so fewer part numbers in the price matching arena than we had before. And then lastly, looking at the bottom of the chart, we can see the aftermarket, and we're just starting to see a little bit of an uptick in the aftermarket parts inflation rate. It's only about 1%, but it is headed up, I think, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But it has been incredibly flat and against all other part types. Next, we're going to change and look at the median delivery days. And remember that we're going to look initially at all part types and then break it down by state and break it down by vehicle type. And a lot of folks have asked, you know, you look at the median delivery days plus 2 standard deviations, and you can see that for all part types over time, we started off in January of 2025 at 9.2 days for that median plus 2 standard deviations. And then we're now down to 6.3. So it has decreased pretty substantially. Looking at the boxes of standard deviation by make, we can see that most are in blue. The darker the blue on this chart, the lower the median delivery days is. The only outlier is Buick. And it's really interesting because Buick only has one model that is assembled in the US. The rest are either assembled in South Korea or mainland China, which could be one of the reasons that we're seeing that kind of delay. But to answer the question, why do we look at median plus 2 standard deviations rather than a simple average? So what I've done here is I've looked at this chart with a few parts on it. And you can see that most every part is 1 day delivery, couple at 2.5, but there is one outlier, and that is that hood hinge that took 11 days to arrive at the collision repair facility. If I just did a simple average, it would give me an average of 2.3 days. It really dilutes the impact of an outlier. So when you look at median plus 2 standard deviations, you capture 95% of the population, but you do not dilute the impact of that outlier. That outlier is going to drive the median upwards. So again, when we look at median plus 2 standard deviations, we get a number of 6.6. So it much more accurately reflects that hood hinge outlier. And because that would affect cycle time, you can't deliver the car without the hood hinge. That's why we look at it that way. So as we split it out by part type, we look at the OEM median delivery days, where we started off the year at 11.2. We're now at 7.8. We do expect that to sort of be seen through lower average rental days, length of rental for repairable vehicles. And we see, interestingly enough, that Buick is the outlier with the highest at 20.9 days. Looking at aftermarket, it's important to remember this is a different scale. It's much, much less. Not to call out the OE as being bad, because the OE has to supply all of these little trim pieces that they normally would not keep in the individual parts department on the shelf. They have to get it from the PDC. That's going to take longer. The aftermarket has a smaller select number of high-moving parts, so it's very, very easy for them to deliver it. We still look at the outliers, and we're seeing it now at 3 days, down from 3.4 in January and a high of 3.6 in both February and May. Looking at recycled, the thing of note here is it really has been very, very stable. You'll notice that in December of 2024, the median, as well as the simple average, that's what that blue line is, went up, and that was because of snowstorms. If you recall, we had some pretty severe southern snowstorms where they're not equipped really to salt the roads, and so a lot of collision repair with recycled parts was delayed. The last thing I wanted to do is look at price-matched parts in the median delivery days. That has come down pretty significantly. As well, it was 6.3 days in January. It is now at 4.2 days. But the interesting thing, remember, these are price-matched OE parts, price-matched against aftermarket. And remember that the aftermarket started at 3.6 days and it's now 3 days. So there is a gap of 1.2 days in September for the difference between price-matched and aftermarket. So you have to ask, is that 1.2 days to get that price match part, is that going to delay or lengthen my length of rental? Next, we're going to take a look at new vehicle sales trends, and I've got this beautiful picture of a Stellantis dealer, and some people accuse me of taking advantage or making fun of Stellantis, and I do a bit, but I also share with other manufacturers. So let's look at the overall seasonally adjusted annual rate of new vehicle sales in the US. This was adjusted downwards again to 15.8 new vehicles sold, so they project what the full year of sales will be. Last year, we officially closed out at 15.9, so it is 100,000 vehicles under last year's pace, but I think that we're seeing softening demand for new vehicles, and I do believe we're probably going to end up at about 15.6 million new vehicles sold. Why does that make a difference? Well, in our world, we look at the average age of a vehicle on the road today, because the older the vehicle, the more likely it is to be totaled. We are now at 12.8 years from new. And if we do not replace older vehicles with brand new vehicles, that average age for the car park in the US continues to age. And looking at a little bit longer, if you recall from the presentation that Matt Moore and I did at the Highway Loss Data Institute back in the spring, we looked at new vehicle series with front AEB, or automatic emergency braking, and you look at the offerings of new vehicles and how that's increased to it's either standard or optional for over 80, almost 90% of the vehicles as of 2023. That is a lot of vehicles with that system being offered. Now look at the next slide, which is really the chart showing where we are with registrations in the car park. And you can see that that is standard or optional in just about 30%. So to tie this together, it's really saying that if we do not get newer vehicles in the car park at a higher rate than the previous year, our average vehicle age is going to continue to age, and AEB won't make that car park penetration on schedule, and we're potentially going to have a fleet that is more prone to driver error and accidents than if they had AEB as optional or standard equipment. And, you know, I do want to bring some wonderful news. Stellantis sold a brand new Jeep Patriot last quarter. According to their official sales report for Q2 of 2025, they sold a new Patriot. And you say, why is this news? Folks, the Patriot was discontinued in 2017. This Patriot has been on the new car sales lot for 8 years. And it's amazing, but they sold it. I hope that person got a good deal. But they're actually able to move the vehicle, and there is a dealer term for this. Vehicles that stay on the lot for a long period of time, unsold, brand new vehicles, it's called lot rot. And this is a great example of lot rot. So if you are ever on a vehicle lot and you pop open the door of a vehicle with you know, the year, and you'll see 2022, 2023, look at it, it's a brand new vehicle, that's a lot rot vehicle, and you can get hopefully a very good deal on it. I also like to look at the slowest moving vehicles, and so here we got the lineup of the 5 slowest selling vehicles in the US and the market days supply down in blue. Market day supply is a measurement of looking at what is the sales rate per day existing and how many vehicles are in inventory in these dealer lots across the US. And at that same sales pace, how long would it take for them to sell all of them? And the Audi S6, which is the sportier version of the A6, they've got 482 days of market day supply. So if you're looking for an Audi, that's the one that you're probably going to get the best deal on. The A6, which is the lower equipment and less sporty, you can see it has smaller wheels, different grille, less horsepower, that has 409 days. The Volkswagen ID.4 at 297 days, even though they were doing a loss leader lease with a $159 a month lease payment on a $50,000 car, and they're still not able to move a lot of them off the lot. So bad, it's gotten so bad that they have ceased temporarily production in Chattanooga of the ID.4 until they sell some of these vehicles. Also from Volkswagen Audi Group, the Q4 e-tron, that's less of a surprise than the A6 and the S6 because that's a full EV, and we see, you know, lower demand, and the tax credits for EVs are falling off at the end of this month. So I expect that will probably add some days to the Audi e-tron. Lastly, one Jag, the Jaguar F-Pace at 239 days. Jaguar Land Rover Group announced that they were pausing new vehicle import because of the taxes. Also, it is because they have a lot of vehicles unsold on the lot from last year and the year before. And we're going to have a little fun here and move and discuss some automotive failures. If you know me, and there are a lot of folks that I've talked to about this, I am obsessed with Edsels. Edsel was in a phenomenal failure. Ford Motor Company thought they needed a vehicle to compete against the broad offering from General Motors. They brought this vehicle with amazing fanfare and a huge investment. What would be $4.6 billion to launch a new vehicle is unheard of. It came with about 27 models in 1958. This one is absolutely my favorite. It is a Bermuda 6-passenger wagon with wood trim. Beautiful, big E400 engine. But it was not well received. There are a lot of derogatory names and some Freudian names associated with the 58 Edsel styling. And despite the ad saying dramatic Edsel styling is here to stay, they changed it next year in 1959, which is the green sedan up at the upper right. They cut the models down to basically one body style from two body styles, meaning large Edsel, small Edsel. They lowered the price. They said it was a market, it was a great value, did not sell very well. At the end, when they pulled the plug in November of 1959, they made very few of the 1960 Edsel. So you can see that horse collar grille is completely gone. It is just a grille restyling basically of the 1960 Ford Galaxy. They sold 118,287 of those vehicles in its entire 3-year run, and it was called an abject failure. So here is our trivia question. This Ford Motor Company model was originally slated to be an expansion of the Edsel division's lineup, but with the failure of Edsel, it was quickly rebranded. What's the name of this car? And what I'm going to ask you to do is go in the chat room, and as I had said, you know, we've got some beautiful prizes for you. The first 3 correct responses, we will mail you these 3 items. Again, it's the phone charging block that you can charge up and carry with you so that when you're out and about, if your phone starts to get low on battery, this will magnetically and latch onto the back of your phone. Also a carabiner, because you can never be too far away from a bottle opener or a screwdriver. And then lastly, a beautiful pen. So, hey, you can talk on your phone, you can write a letter, and you can drink a beer. Perfect. Okay, do we have any winners yet?
We have 2 winners now. We had a couple incorrect answers. I don't know if you want me to read those or not. But we have Ken Weiss and Trent Bickford so far
Kenny.
have it correct. So
okay,
one more.
We got to wait for one more so we can get all 3 of us. What were the incorrect answers, Patty?
We got Thunderbird, Mustang, and Mercury Meteoro?
Oh, the Meteor?
It might be a typo.
Ah.
Oh, we got a third one.
Okay.
Joseph Sy.
Oh, Joe. Excellent. Excellent. Good. I'm so glad. Yes, it is the Comet. So the interesting thing is, if you go into Ford archives, you will see actually the Comet with Edsel badging on the side in mid-1959. And interestingly enough, if you look at the print up in the upper left, it will say now available at Mercury-Comet dealers. First 2 years, it was not called the Mercury Comet. It was just the Comet. It was a standalone model. It is a dressed up version of the Ford Falcon and was very successful and sold more in the first 2 years than Edsel did for the entire 3 years of Edsels. Now, we do have modern examples of failures, and I'll give you a recent history and then a current one that is an absolute lemon. This is the Pontiac Aztek. Those of you who know me know I worked at General Motors at GMAC Insurance and was on the Insurability and Repairability Committee, and this was the first vehicle I was given the honor of reviewing, going down into the basement of the design center and looking at this vehicle on the stand. And it was a memory. Don't know if it was a good memory. It was a memory. But the interesting thing too is that Pontiac was trying to get this young energy vibe going, and they decided to do a sponsoring of season 1 of Survivor. And so they called me up and said, hey, you know, you need to underwrite 30 youngsters, as the Pontiac brand manager called them, and said, we're going to put them, these couples, in a Aztek for a 30-day lease with a camcorder to record their adventures. Yeah, and I said, okay, well, what do they get? And they go, oh, well, you know, first prize is you get that Aztek and the camcorder. And I said, I bet the grand prize is you just get the camcorder. But interestingly enough, we did have an accident. One of those Azteks was hit in the front, and it didn't look any better. All right, so here is an example of a modern failure. So you all know that I have some very strong opinions on the Cybertruck. I have always said that it looks like a DeLorean whose mother smoked during pregnancy. And at the end of Q2 of 2025, only 52,000 of these vehicles were sold. Now again, that is lower than Edsel and lower than Aztec. In the second quarter of 2025, sales fell 51%. I think everybody that wanted one of these cars bought one, and the market is shrinking. Unfortunately, Elon Musk was ramping up production for these vehicles. And so there are now 10,000 unsold Cybertrucks stockpiled in the Tesla lots and rented abandoned malls as of May 2025. That represents about $800 million in unsold Cybertruck inventory. And you know, the problem is that Tesla is in probably worse shape than a lot of people may think. The big beautiful bill that was recently signed into law eliminates that $7,500 tax credit for EVs and a $4,000 tax credit for buying a used EV as of the end of this month. That is really going to hit Tesla hard. Secondly, and this is probably more interesting, is that the US is eliminating Tesla's market for selling regulatory credits to other car makers. Because you know, there was a government policy of if you can't make the corporate average fuel economy standards, you had to pay a fee, a penalty. You could, however, buy credits from companies that exceeded those miles per gallon. Now, it's an obvious question, why was an EV company that never had an internal combustion vehicle eligible for getting mileage credits? Doesn't make any sense to me. But they were valuable, and you look at a $2.76 billion a year revenue stream for Tesla that was being pumped into the bottom line every year for the last, well, since Tesla started manufacturing cars in volume, they were able to get these credits. This is the only reason that Tesla as a standalone company was able to be in the black, was because they had this huge income from the tax credit. That's going away. Their sales are falling. Global sales have fallen for Tesla, despite the fact in the rest of the world, not in the US, EVs overall are growing. Now, if you look at this, this is probably going to keep Elon Musk up at night. You look at the leading share by brand, and BYD, the Chinese manufacturer of EVs, actually controls just under 20% of the market as of the 2024, end of 2024. Tesla at 7.5 and shrinking. Geely, another Chinese company, at 5.5 and on down the road. But you look at this 5 years ago, Tesla was the largest manufacturer of EVs, and they have fallen pretty precipitously. Now, looking at the two best-selling BYD models, they have the Seagull at $9,800, and they have the Dolphin at $13,900. These vehicles were never meant to be imported to the US. They don't really have the safety equipment that we would need to be federalized, but they do sell in the rest of the world, and they sell at a pretty fast pace despite the name of Dolphin and Seagull. But this is always something that I look at, is where in the global picture is Tesla, and Tesla is falling pretty quickly. I did write an article in a little bit more detail for the Canadian market in Collision Repair magazine. It's out. If you just Google Tesla Greg Horn, you'll find it. And lastly, we're going to take a look at an auto financing crisis. And it has some very eerie parallels to the housing finance bubble of 2007, 2008. But it also plays into the collision repair world and the insurance world, because you're seeing a lot of people with some pretty scary financing. This was one that really hit me. It was an online ad because I was Googling new car loan rates, blah, 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 just to get some background. And this is an ad. You wonder why this woman is smiling. If she put no money down, financed 120% of this loan for 96 months, folks, and no payments for 90 days. I think this may be the last time she does smile. It's really, really crazy that you can get this kind of financing. And remember that we have a lot of our insurance customers and body shop customers that do not have great credit. So if you look at the average APR rate for a new car and a used car by credit score, I mean, literally, when you look at new car loan rates for someone with super prime credit at 5.27%, and go down to the bottom of the chart where it's deep subprime, or as I call it, deep S, because you're going to be in deep S if you're paying almost 16% for a new car loan. As well on the used car side, going from 7.5 to almost 22%. You can't get ahead with this, folks. This is really a problem. And on top of that, new vehicle average transaction price since the introduction of the tariffs has really gone up, and it's just hovering under $49,000 now. That is a lot of money for the average price of a new vehicle. So how do you do that? You know, you say, I need this car. Now, we don't need a new car. Well, I do. But the absolute transportation needs dictate that you do have to take on a lot of auto loan debt. So looking at the financing facts today, we see that the average new car payment in the United States now is $742, the average. 1 in 5 new car buyers in the first quarter of 2025 closed a new car loan that is 7 years long. Folks, a lot of those aren't going to be paid to fruition, and negative equity is going to be rolled into that new car loan. 1 in 6 car owners has a single car payment today of more than $1,000. Auto loan debt in its total in the United States is $1.7 trillion and going up. This is a record high. It's amazing how much debt is controlled, and what's happening to that debt is pretty scary. In January of 2022, 82% of Americans that purchased a new car paid over MSRP list. That means that right now, the car prices that have come back into focus, you're going to see these folks carrying that amount they paid over MSRP as an instant negative equity, and it's not going to go away. Nearly 1 in 4 trades in the fourth quarter of 2024 had a negative equity of over $10,000. Folks were happy to roll $10,000 of negative equity into a new car loan, presumably at that longer rate, and going to be paying and being upside down for far longer than they ever anticipated. You know, that's the thing. That's when it impacts us. If we see that, you know, insurance companies are totaling out the vehicle, you're going to find people that are upside down in their vehicles and faced with that idea of rolling that negative equity into another car loan. Hopefully, they're in good standing in their loan and could do a substitution of collateral for a like kind and quality vehicle, but that's not often explored by vehicle owners anymore. The average negative equity or upside down amount traded, the average is $6,838. So that means you've got almost $7,000 that doesn't even apply to the depreciation of the asset that you've purchased with this loan. And the longer the loan term, the more you're going to be paying in interest over the loan. So it's a very vicious cycle. And it seems like folks are just pushing off that negative equity bubble. And someday, in the event of a total loss, that's probably going to hit home. So why are these longer loans growing in popularity? You know, the first half of 2025, 84-month car loans accounted for 20% of all new car loans. Now, the reason it makes sense for the F&I guy at the dealership to sell a longer loan is to close the loan. You have to demonstrate to the bank that debt to income ratio. Again, if your monthly payment is lower, it fits better, makes that ratio of your monthly income to your monthly debt for this car loan that much more palatable for the bank. So finance companies, no doubt, are benefiting from being in those longer loans because they make more money off the interest on that loan period. And it's also likely, though, with that 84-month loan period, that people are never going to pay it to fruition. So they're going to keep that negative cycle of rolling negative equity into the newest car loan that they buy. So a good example of this is look at the interest on a 7% loan, and it's 7% irrespective of the length of the loan, which we all know the longer the loan, the higher the interest rate, so it's going to be even more in total interest. But for this example, we kept the rate at 7% APR. If you had a 3-year loan on that $40,000 at 7%, you'd pay the financing company $4,463 in interest. If it were a 7-year loan, you'd be looking at $10,711. That's why, folks, that's why the banks are so anxious to close those loans. They make more money. They're going to charge you a higher interest rate because there is a little bit of an increase in the risk associated with that. But again, the sales feature of it lowers your debt to income ratio and makes it more likely that the lower income folks can finance a more expensive car, just make the term longer. So yeah, the only other thing that we need to look at is, okay, well, are people able to make their payments? And this is really a scary chart because we're seeing the percentage in that sort of orange color, the percentage of loans that fell 30 days in arrears, 30 days past due. It is at the highest rate since the housing crisis. You look at the percentage of loans at least 90% past due in that blue, and that has really exploded. You can see that at the tail end of the housing crisis, starting into the 2010s, that had hit a record. We're hitting that rate again. And then also what we're seeing is financing companies of those deep subprime or deep S vehicle owners, they're filing for bankruptcy. Tricolor, who operated non-standard financing as well as dealer lots in Texas, is the second in under 35 days to declare bankruptcy. Automotive Credit Corp filed or ceased operations on August 7th. Why is that so important? Well, the ripple effect from Tricolor's bankruptcy will hit some of the major banks. JP Morgan Chase, Fifth Third, and Barclays PLC are the ones who are bracing for these bad loans to come to roost because they, in a pretty similar model to what caused the housing financing bubble to burst, these are warehouse lenders for Tricolor, these three banks. They provide that short-term financing for the bundling of that loan to be resold to another company. If those things are coming up and these are being defaulted on, the guy that's holding the bag are going to be the Barclays, the JP Morgans, and the Barclays. So this is a pretty serious situation. It's going to be exacerbated if the unemployment rate rises higher than it is now. So we really do look at this as being a potential impact on the economy as a whole, with $1.7 trillion of total auto debt in the US. That can be a significant factor. So as we come to the end of this, we're going to take, again, if you want to put in the chats, any of the questions you have. Patty will read them out for us. But I always want to give you kind of a recap of your key takeaways. So yeah, we do see that parts price inflation is happening, but aftermarket inflation is at a much slower pace than new OE or even recycled. And we discussed the reasons that OE and recycled inflation rates are hitting now. Recycled, again, because of the strong foreign exchange rate, that is what is impacting it. Normally, I would look at the trend line between recycled parts and new OE parts and say, well, I determine, or salvers determine the sale price of that salvage piece as a percentage of the new OE part. But we're seeing a separation. We're seeing the inflation rate of the new OE part actually at a much faster rate than it is in recycled, but recycled is starting to catch up. The median delivery days for all part types has improved, and it seems like we should probably see a decrease in the length of rental because part delays are not an issue as they were in 2023 and 2024. The new vehicle sales rate is slipping. Again, that's going to lead to our aging car park, and it's going to dilute the impact of these ADAS equipment being in a larger share of the car park. And hey, somebody actually wanted a brand new 2017 Jeep Compass. That still amazes me. Tesla is facing some serious challenges as they go forward. Some of them, yes, they were self-inflicted by the CEO, but there are a lot of market impacts overall. Auto delinquencies, loan delinquencies are approaching crisis levels, and we don't have a really positive outlook on that. So that is something that we in the finance, insurance, and parts business all need to watch, because that will impact what gets repaired, what does not. If you get in a small accident, do you keep the dent and pay the car payment, or keep the dent and pay the rent? Yes, that will happen more than those lower drivable claims being turned in. And again, with the negative equity amount on average reaching record levels, that really complicates total loss settlement, because most folks won't realize what the actual cash value is of their totaled vehicle until you as an insurance company present them with the calculated settlement. The problem is they may not be able to get out of it other than going into a new loan and facing a lot of negative equity, and you know the financing companies will gladly accept that. But there is a substitution of collateral option that can be of benefit and allow that customer to substitute a like kind and quality vehicle and remain in their financing situation as is. So again, thanks for joining. We'll go into the questions and answers. And Patty, do we have some Q&A?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. As always, lots of interesting topics. I just wanted to say, if you won the comic question, we'll be reaching out to get your information so we can mail that gift to you. So look for our email. And while we wait for those questions to come into the question section, actually, Greg, I do have a question for you. Now, you've shown us that we've only seen a 1% increase in aftermarket parts prices. Where do you think that will go in the future, and what does that timeline look like?
Great question. So one of the reasons, we've seen the tariffs be in place since Liberation Day for the Taiwanese incoming goods, including auto parts. When we look at that, we know that a lot of the suppliers and distributors of parts in the U.S. of aftermarket parts bought a significant amount of inventory. I'm talking like 9 months worth of inventory before the tariffs went into effect. So they are working through a lot of that aged, bought at the pre-tariff amount inventory. A lot of those suppliers also, when they have had to replenish stock, if they had unsold pre-tariff inventory in stock and bought the new inventory, a lot of folks, to figure out what their sale price will be, will do a merged or an averaged price. So if you have a fender that you acquired for $100 pre-tariff and you have one now that's post-tariff, it's $120, you would potentially, as a supplier, say, well, my cost of this fender is $110, so I'm going to base my bid in the parts trader system based on that. So that's one of the reasons we haven't really seen the full impact of tariffs. Now, the second part of the question that Patty asked was, okay, so what's the timeline? So the timeline is, I believe, in the fourth quarter, most of that inventory of A movers and B movers in the aftermarket parts supplier warehouses are going to be depleted, and these are going to be all post-tariff parts that are going to be sold in the fourth quarter. I do see that as sort of the timeline. Now, the amount is the interesting thing, because remember that tariff is levied against the price of acquisition of that part. So in my example earlier of that $100 to $120. So again, that's not the sell price to the body shop. That could be, say, $200. And it's not what the price is that would appear on the estimate. So even though it's a 20% tariff, you won't see that direct 20% levied against the list price of that. You will see a portion of that. I think probably the inflation will go up from 1%. I think it'll probably settle 3 to 4% if I were to take a guess now. Call me on that in the end of fourth quarter or at CIC in January and see if I'm right. Do we have any other questions?
We do. So this question comes from Tim. You talked about medium parts delivery days. Can you provide any insight into the average distance from the body shop that parts are coming from? Maybe what percentage of total parts come from out of state?
Ooh, that is good. That is something that I would have to research and look at sold parts, by warehouse from the address of the warehouse to the body shop. That is something we can look into. It's a big lift, but Tim, I'm on it.
All right, and this question comes from William. With the increase of people rolling equity, are we seeing an increase in gap insurance sales?
Unfortunately, we're not. We're actually seeing a decrease in the overall percentage of new loans closed with gap insurance. Now, a lot of first-tier leases will automatically have gap built into it. Unfortunately, what you have with those longer term with negative equity is a very price-sensitive buyer. Gap insurance adds to that monthly payment. Most of those folks are not going to be wanting to close it with gap. So we've actually seen from about 5 years ago a decrease in the frequency of gap insurance on a loan closed for a new vehicle. Scary, scary trend.
All right, and we do have a question to go back to some of the charts, but I just wanted to throw this out there that we will be sending a recording. So if you want to review some of those charts again, you can you'll get an email with a video recording, so you can watch that in the recording. Okay, so this next question comes from Tom. Are you finding carriers starting to use eBay or OE parts? For OE parts, I'm sorry.
You know, it's interesting. I haven't seen eBay in particular. There are a lot of, because everybody knows I'm a car guy, I do buy a lot of OE parts through OEPartDiscount.com, BMWPartDiscount.com. So there are these mega dealers that deal in mechanical and collision parts that buy and then sell at a reduced list price. There are a lot of OEs that do not dictate to the dealership what the OE list price can be. So that leads to a lot of these foreign car companies, especially being able to offer these internet deals. Haven't seen much of eBay in new parts, but yeah, when we look at buying collision parts or hard parts, you do see a lot of OE going through these large discount dealers. Any other questions for us?
Not right now.
Okay. Well, folks, again, I really appreciate you spending your day with me. I hope you found value. Again, I'm very humbled that you chose to spend a part of your day. In addition, if anybody wants some of those charts from the deck, just email me at greg.horn@partstrader.com. I can bundle those up. I would ask you, however, to leave the attribution to PartsTrader, especially if you wanted to use the Highway Loss Data Institute. I've also included those. Please leave the attribution, and I'd be happy to send them to you. And with that, folks, again, I appreciate it. Look forward to our next collision report magazine coming out in the fall. And then we will be doing another one of these as soon as I have the energy to do another one. All right, folks, have a wonderful day. Thank you.